Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Tennis Podcast. It is Monday, the 28th of July. There has been a lot of tennis in the last 7 days. We've got a packed agenda today, lots to get into, and I'm joined by Matt Roberts to do just that. How are you doing, Matt Roberts?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, basking in the lioness glow from yesterday and the glow of a fun week's tennis as well. So yes, very well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm basking in both those things as well. Really enjoyed Washington this week. Really looking forward to talking about it. Not with David Law. He remains in Portugal. At last check, he was off to a water park to find, quote, the biggest slide they have. So I'll leave everyone with that visual, but reassure you that his boots are being filled by the Athletic's Matt Futterman. Hello, Matt Futterman. How are you doing? When did you last visit a water park?
It's been a little while. Thank you very much for having me. Those are very, very large boots to fill, both literally and figuratively, of course. So a little nervous about it. There is a water park not far from me on the Jersey Shore, which I used to take my kids to a lot. And then it got to a point where, like, I was the one who really wanted to go to the water park. And it was sort of like, come on, you guys love the water park. And they actually were kind of over the water park, but I kept wanting to go. So it was a little awkward. They hung on for a few years. But then, like, last weekend, my middle daughter, who's now almost 24, was here with her friends. And, like, all of a sudden they're like, we're going to the water park. And it, like, took every ounce of self-control for me to be like, can I come? And I didn't and wasn't invited, but they had a grand old time. And had they said, you want to come? I absolutely would have traveled to Thundering Surf with them.
I really wasn't expecting such a poignant and pathos-laden answer to my opening perky question about water parks, Matt.
Water parks are near and dear to my heart. Basically anything involving any like activity involving water, like I'm in, except fishing.
Yeah. Oh. Well, Tommy Paul would disagree with you there. Let's turn our attention to Washington and the ATP and WTA combined 500 event that finished up yesterday, both finals yesterday, Sunday. Matt, I should specify which Matt I'm addressing here. Matt Roberts, you and I talked last week about how we were anticipating a good week in Washington, a combined 1 week long men's and women's event, a 500, so with just enough stakes that things felt like they mattered, but it moved along at a clip. I thought there was some great tennis. It was a great speed of court. I always sort of come away from Washington thinking, yes, this is how an American hard court should be. And I feel like the week really didn't disappoint. It lived up to certainly my expectations. I don't know how you felt.
I agree. I think the front end of the week, I spent a lot of time actually watching the second court because that seemed to be where a lot of the fun doubles was, and those crowds were absolutely packed. And we had Venus Williams's comeback, which we'll talk about, which just was such a great story for those first few days. And then I think it felt like maybe on the men's side, it was building momentum with felt like maybe Shelton was going to be in the final and that was going to be a real moment for the tournament as well. And then when Shelton lost, I imagine like the locals were maybe a bit disappointed with the men's final that they perhaps ended up with. But actually, it turned out to be one of the most compelling finals of the year, I think. Davidovich Fokina, De Minaur, late last night here in the UK, watching that. And then great stories in the women's event as well, with like some top seeds losing, and it looked like we were going to be on for a 2021 US Open final repeat between Raducanu and Fernandez. We didn't quite get that, but I enjoyed following their stories as well. And yeah, just a great event, a kind of everything that you could possibly want from an event packed into 1 week. I loved it, like you.
Should we start with Venus Williams, seeing as you've mentioned that, and maybe because I'm wanting to put off the heartbreak of talking about Alejandro Davidovich Fokina for a few moments longer. But in many ways, kind of aside from the eventual champions, Venus Williams was the story of this week, right? Just her receiving that wild card to play in Washington, aged 45, was a huge story in itself, let alone her getting a victory, a straight sets victory over Peyton Stearns in the opening round, ended up losing in the next round to Magdalena Frech, a perfectly creditable performance. She also got a win in the doubles alongside Hailey Baptiste. I'm imagining Washington, Matt Futterman, feel like this is the best value wildcard that has ever been awarded in the history of time.
Yeah, and I mean, I should say, like, I've been to Washington a few times. It is like a great event. It's really hot. It's like really swampy. I mean, like DC in July is like really not where you want to be. But
Swampy,
other than
it's not a good word for me, Matt.
No, it's rough. I mean, but like other than that, like that tournament is like tennis as it ought to be. It's like in the middle of a public park in the middle of the city. It's like the U.S. Open crowd is pretty darn diverse because it's in New York. The D.C. crowd is like incredibly diverse, and you could see, like, if you were just not looking at the tennis for a second and looking at the crowd, you could see like how, it was just there's lots of black people in the crowd, and it's just like a very open access, and that's like the feel of the tournament. So it was like the perfect fit to me to have Venus Williams not only receive a wild card, but also accept a wild card this time. That's sort of the key here, because she had received a wild card to Indian Wells early in the year and was like, oh yeah, I'm actually like in Norway or something like that. So she actually accepted it. Which is confusing,
because I thought I thought a wild card was something you had to request. I didn't realize proactive, like, hey, there's a wild card here if you want one. I didn't realize that happened, but maybe I'm being naive.
I think
like Venus would have had to request one for Cincinnati, right? She made the first move, surely.
Perhaps. I don't know. I don't know that there's an actual etiquette or protocol for these things. I think there's like lots of conversations that go on between tournament directors and players and agents and things like that. Even in one of her after the first match, like she made a reference to Mark Ein, the owner of the City Open, who like always says to her, like, I'm holding a wild card for you, V. Like, so there's that conversation going on. Like, it's out there if you want it. Like, so has it been offered? Has it been asked for? Has it been requested? I think it's just kind of like an ongoing conversation between certain players and certain tournament directors, and everything in tennis is relationships. So, but yeah, I mean, if there was a really fitting place for her to like have a wild card and like try and mount, I don't know if we can really call it a comeback. It's just sort of it's more of like just a continuation of the career that just sort of like goes on. And I had to say, like, I think generally a year and a half ago when she was got some wild cards and playing pretty terribly, I was pretty much kind of over Venus Williams getting wild cards, and I thought she was like getting in the way of young people. But this one, like, she seemed like she was playing really well and she was ready for it. And I thought it was like brilliant that she warmed up with the doubles and kind of like got herself rolled into a groove, got the tournament into a groove, got Matt Futterman into a groove, watching her play with Hailey Baptiste. And I was sort of watched that first match and I was like, wow, she actually is moving well, hitting the ball well. She's only covering half the court, but still, it's a really good start. So, yeah, and it was a great story, and it was great. It was great to watch, and she was just so happy. There was just like a lot of joy on the court there, and it was just great to see.
Yeah, I loved it. I think when I've watched Venus Williams in the past couple of times that she's played, there has been a slight discomfort because she just didn't seem that physically well. Like, her knee was clearly a big issue in the past few years. Immediately now, you could tell that she was healthier and moving better. Like, and she can still absolutely crank that serve. I mean, that really stood out as a great shot for her, and the ground strokes as well with those long levers. Like, that's not going to go away. And it's just a joy to kind of see those shots again. And she played great against Peyton Stearns. It got a bit tight at the end, didn't it? Like, she needed a lot of match points to get over the line. But like, what a moment for her to win a match in 2025 against a, top 50 player. There was one rally where she hyperextended on the knee and it sort of collapsed on her, and I had a sharp intake of breath. But otherwise, like, just an absolute joy that whole occasion. And yeah, like, I really enjoyed as well in her post-match interview that she didn't seem to know who Magdalena Freck was. she was like, who? that really cracked me up.
It was very Wickmeyer energy.
It really was. So I enjoyed that. And look, I think kind of, if you did have a problem with this wildcard, you probably have a problem with wildcards generally, because as you said, Catherine, like, how can you not look at that and think that with the packed crowds and the people flocking to it, that was a good use of a wild card? Like, it just invigorated that event, and that's kind of where I stand on it.
It pivoted my general stance against wild cards. Like, it made me rethink it and adjust my feeling, which was that, at 250s and 500s can have wild cards. 1000s and slams, I think the wild cards should maybe only be into qualifying, and maybe actually even not exist in slams. So, but yeah, that's it. I had been a pretty staunch anti-wild card person because I thought it just, like, it made the sport kind of goofy. But this changed my thought.
See, I've been percolating for the last few weeks and months and incubating a very strong anti-wildcard sentiment. I think I don't believe in wildcards. I think they're anti-competitive and anti-democratic, and I like democracy and competition. But I will admit that this Venus Williams wildcard is a blow to my newly. my new stance. And look, if we're gonna have wildcards, this is what they should look like. This is the most positive I can possibly feel about a wildcard. Although I didn't necessarily feel positive about it conceptually, I did have a lot of anxiety about whether it would be awkward and sad. And I loved it too. I loved watching her beat Peyton Stearns. I loved watching her play in that doubles. The whole thing was electric and, as you say, really uplifting and very joyful. But she came into press afterwards, didn't she, and delivered this really, really positive message about, just don't put limits on yourself. Age doesn't mean anything. And I so want to believe that and just go with it and be like, yeah, she's such an inspiration. Age doesn't mean anything. But also, we're tennis podcasters that have spent half our year talking about Novak Djokovic and the reality of, not being Father Time being the one battle nobody, no matter how great, can win. I guess with Venus Williams, you've got the relief of she's not putting any pressure on us to make any sense of it or make it mean anything or talk about it in terms of a comeback or what's possible. Like, she and we are totally free to just enjoy it absolutely for what it is. So I'm going to try and do that. And stick with my new stance on wildcards. I'm going to try and have my cake and eat it, basically.
And also, I was looking at that draw and being like, well, your problem here cannot be with Venus Williams playing in the draw when like loads of the top players are getting buys. I have way more problem with the buys like taking slots away from players playing. Like that was how I looked at that draw and was like, I'm pleased that Venus Williams' name is in there. I'm not pleased that I see all these buys in there. Like you could fill those slots with more players, and then like you'd have more room for wildcards like Venus Williams as well. And yeah, I kind of think as well that Venus Williams getting a win at 45, you know, like I did see a lot of positive reaction to it. Like a lot of people loved this. I want to recognize that. I also saw a lot of people being like, you know, sort of questioning the sort of competitiveness and the level of women's tennis. And I just thought, like, if Federer announced a comeback and won a match, no one would be talking about the competitive of men's tennis. They'd be talking about how great Roger Federer is. Like, it's a remarkable thing that Venus Williams is still able to win a match at 45. Like, she is a marvel in that respect. It's not normal, and like it's an achievement that like I just feel like can be massively celebrated.
And 250s and 500 are already anti-competitive. I mean, they already have like limits on who can play. I mean, certainly the 250s are kind of, what can you? I mean, you saw it with the whole Madison Keys situation because she couldn't play because she had made the top 10, and they already had another top 10 player, right? And
you've got the murkiness of guarantees, which is something that we all know happens, but
so they already
isn't talked about, and
so they already are anti-competitive. So what's a
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't fight for anything and just say, "Oh well, who cares? Let's make the whole thing an exhibition."
Right.
Let's get Emma Navarro and Jannik Sinner together. Right. Call it a party.
Right.
More on that later. Since we're with the women's tournament, let's put off talking about Alejandro Davidovich Fokina's heartbreak a little longer still and talk about the champion and the final and the matches leading up to it. Leylah Fernandez winning this title, the biggest title of her career, beating Anna Kalinskaya 6-1, 6-2 in kind of, well, the most uneventful match of her week, really. She really rolled back the years this last week in terms of becoming that player that Pam Shriver described as the best show in tennis at the end of 2021. Not just that run to the US Open final where she played great match after great match after great match, but she continued it, didn't she? Remember that October in Indian Wells, she lit up the place as well, and she's a gritty old competitor, isn't she, when she gets her teeth into a tennis match. And sometimes I'm watching her thinking, how are you making this work with that serve? Like, how is this working as a game? But she's a terrier and a warrior, and she thrived, I think, in the sort of conditions, in Matt's words, swampy, which is a term that is making me shudder. But yeah, she thrived in the swamp, didn't she? Where many others wilted. She was incredible this week.
Yeah, and look, if David were here, he would definitely be telling people that this has happened just after he's drafted Leylah Fernandez into his fantasy team. So shout out David for that foresight. He maybe saw this run coming, and I didn't, frankly, because, like you say, I've watched Leylah Fernandez this year, and it's been a bit of a struggle at times. You know, like she hasn't won that many matches, and the serve is just such a glaring part of the game that you feel like's been holding her back. You know, like the technique on it, she's so front on. Her toss is all over the place, really. She's chasing it. I keep thinking of the Mary Carrillo line about if you need good footwork to hit a serve, you've got a problem. And that's kind of where she is or has been with her serve because of that ball toss. But actually, she had a great serving week. And when that shot's under control and she's getting her teeth into these matches, you're kind of reminded about what a great player she can be. And look, I always, when I think of Leylah Fernandez, I think of Emma Raducanu because they just seem so linked because of that US Open run. And one of the things we often say about Emma Raducanu is that her game has struggled against some of the top players. When she comes up against them, there's a weight of shot issue and she can't really hurt them quite so much. But it's interesting with Fernandez that run to the US Open final was defined by her causing the top players problems. She has got a game because of the way she takes the ball early and she can rush them that can kind of compete with anyone when it's all coming together for her, as it was this week. And we saw it. She beat Pegula very early in this tournament, and then she backed that up by beating Rybakina, two of the top players in the sport. And, Rybakina herself has got a real closing problem at the moment. She's not finishing matches, and this was one that she should have won. She served for the match to win in straight sets against Fernandez. But you just give Fernandez an inch and she will take a mile, and she just dug in that second set, surged through the tie break, and then had another surge right at the end of the match in the final set tie break to beat Rybakina, and then just absolutely steamrolled Kalinskaya in the final, who didn't really show up. But yeah, like a great throwback week in a way. It feels like a weird thing to say for Fernandez because she's still young, but it did feel much more like the performances that she put in, as you said, in that 2021 period. And I guess, like, judging it, what does it mean? I just don't know whether the serve is going to be reliably like this moving forward, because I think it has to be like this for her to be able to play the way that she did this week and get into these matches. But I hope so, because, as you said, a reminder of kind of the show that she can put on and the way that she can compete in these matches and make them occasions. Just her matches just draw people in, and that's a great quality. I really did enjoy watching her this week.
So I actually think, like, I mean, you say throwback week. I think, I haven't looked at it like in the last 24 hours or something, but I think the arc of her ranking and her performance is actually pretty good. Like, she's in the top 30 now, and she wasn't there. Like, I don't know. I think I'm trying to think of like which. I had a long talk with her before at one, not this past Australian Open, the Australian Open before, and she had fallen down in the rankings and then was like climbing her way back up. And she was like, yeah, I tried to get away with like not working and had to have some, come to Jesus conversations with coaches and, and like I work very hard. And like she's kind of been, I think at that point she was like working her way into the top 40 and that was like her goal. And then she's like, I think she's just like scrapping her way into what's going to be like a really solid career.
What's a solid career? Like, what do you, top 20, consistently top 20? Could she qualify for a WTA finals?
So I don't know if she's going to like have a season where she's going to finish in the top 10, but it's a solid career is like, she's going to make a lot of money. Like she's going to be, from September 10th, 2021 on, whose career would you rather have, Emma Raducanu or Leylah Fernandez? From that date on, who would you rather have, Leylah Fernandez or Bianca Andreescu? These are all like players who like have their shooting star moment, or would you rather be someone who grinds out $10 million or something like that over, and yeah, she's basically the top woman from a pretty wealthy country. Like she's got a really nice Lululemon deal. Like
and they make great kit.
Yeah, she looks great. And the après tennis kit that she shows up to in the press conferences, like some of the pants she shows up in look so comfortable. You just want to like
Lululemon use high quality fabrics.
Right.
Not all sportswear manufacturers do
right.
that.
So anyway, so that's what I'm saying is like a solid career. Like let's set aside.
I guess those three names you throw out, Leylah Fernandez at this stage looks like the player that might have the fewest what ifs about her. Like she might be the one that ends up kind of maximizing her career. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to say Bianca Andreescu hasn't like maximized because she's just had all these terrible injuries.
She's been prevented from
right
doing that. I'm not, just as I'm not ready to talk about Alejandro Davidovich Fokina yet, I'm definitely not ready to talk about Bianca Andreescu yet.
So anyway, I just think like I don't know, and I also had this. She took that hard loss. I think second round in Wimbledon this year, and she just like didn't show up. And I think I was one of like 2 or 3 people in one of those post-match news conferences because she's genuinely like really interesting to talk to and is always very generous emotionally. And it became like, and there was like 3 of us in a small room and she just like broke down. And it was like one of those awkward, like it didn't turn out to be awkward because I think we were all like pretty kind to her. But it turned into, it wasn't really a press conference. It was kind of like, we were kind of giving her a pep talk and being like, don't be so hard on yourself. I think it was the first time I actually handed a tennis player a tissue. Because like, I was sitting next to her and she's sitting there crying and like, I happened to have a tissue.
You're not a monster.
I happen to have a tissue on me, like here. And she's, like, anyway, it was, and she was like down and, but she was better by the time she walked out of she was a little better as she walked out of the door and it was like, chin up, Leylah, it's going to be okay. And like, here she comes back and she basically wins her next tournament. And like, that's who I think of when I think of Leylah Fernandez. Like, she's a tough kid, like, and she's going to be a tough kid for, I think, a long time. And she's and she's great to watch. Like, 95% of the time, she is great. She is there.
Yeah. I think sort of every season she's had like a run of some kind or a title of some kind, whether it be at the Billie Jean King Cup or smaller sort of 250 level events. Like she's had these little reminders of what she can do, and it's kept her at a very consistent ranking, unlike Emma Raducanu and Andreescu as the examples that you've given. I just feel like coming into Washington this year, she'd actually had a losing record on the tour in 2025. It did feel to me like there was a bit of a decline going on, and just like the eye test with that serve has been such a problem for such a long time. But I guess I use the word throwback because of like the feel of some of her matches this week, like just turning them into those great contests, like that feeling of like she's never down and out. And that was there this week, which I loved seeing, and it really carried her through against some big names in difficult conditions.
Yeah. The Rybakina match, how Rybakina didn't win that. Yes, it was very much partly down to the dogged determination of Leylah Fernandez, but Rybakina is a shell of the player that she once was. And Anna Kalinskaya in the final, she's got to be one of the best players in the WTA not to have won a title. I mean, obviously there's obvious parallels we're going to make now with Alejandro Davidovich Fokina in the men's, but very different type of final here. She was nowhere near at all. Kalinskaya, having been brilliant to beat Emma Raducanu in the semi-finals, I really favoured Raducanu going into that one, having seen the tennis she'd been playing all week. I thought it was a fantastic week for Raducanu, and her serve that had been so strong for the week, getting her through to the semi-finals, just wasn't quite there in that semi-final, and Kalinskaya was bang on it. But yeah, a fantastic week for Raducanu, and I was slightly disappointed not to get the replay of the 2021 US Open final, but well played, Leylah Fernandez. And that's one champion. The second champion in Washington, Alex de Minaur, beating Alejandro Davidovich Fokina 5-7, 6-1, 7-6 in the final, saving 3 championship points. And an extraordinary performance from Alex de Minaur. He's got a bit of the terrier about himself. His 10th career title, but his first of the year. And let's not forget, it has been a was maybe not a difficult year, but a difficult period for him. He's been talking about burnout. He had a strange grass court season, really. Of course, he reached that quarterfinal and played well against Novak Djokovic, but basically it's been a tough few months for him, and this is a real benchmark week and performance for him. But it's going to be hard to give him his dues without talking about the devastation of Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, who has now squandered match points in 2 finals this season and is surely the best player in the ATP not to have won a title. Matt, any Matt?
Yeah, look, if you told me that Alejandro Davidovich Fokina would have a more devastating final this year than his Delray Beach one, I would have said impossible. And yet I think we got it. Look, the quality of opponent higher. I think he may be expected to win the Delray Beach one against Kecmanovic. Like that did feel like one that got away for sure. Going into this, even though I felt like Davidovich Fokina was maybe playing the better tennis through the week, beaten Taylor Fritz and then beat Ben Shelton, doing so on the same day because he finished against Taylor Fritz so late, he had to come back literally the same day and beat Ben Shelton. A really impressive back-to-back effort from Davidovich Fokina. I felt like he was playing actually closer to his peak than De Minaur was through the week. De Minaur racking up a lot more errors than we're kind of used to seeing from him, but getting through these matches impressively because he's such a good competitor, as you've said. So I didn't really have Alejandro Davidovich Fokina necessarily as the favourite against De Minaur, a guy who, as you said, had already won 9 titles and is very, very good in finals when he's the higher ranked player. You know, he wins matches that he's expected to win, does De Minaur. And yet Davidovich Fokina gets himself in a position up 4-1 in the third and has love 30 on the De Minaur serve, serving for the match at 5-3, gets to 30 love, and his forehand just absolutely vacates the stadium. and then the game at 5-4, he has 3 championship points. I have to say, De Minaur plays those championship points extremely well. Like the first one, he knocks off a volley winner. The second one, he creates the kind of rally that he wants. De Minaur, a long one, and draws it out. But it's the third one where Davidovich Fokina hits a forehand approach and De Minaur throws up this defensive lob. And there must have been a part of Davidovich Fokina that thought about taking that lob out of the air and hitting it, but I think a bigger part, and the part that took over, was this might drop out, and God, wouldn't it be good if this dropped out so that this is over. And he lets it bounce, and it's 16 millimeters in.
Yeah.
And then he has kind of an awkward smash to hit, backpedaling, and again, the rally plays out from there, and he comes forward, Davidovich Fokina, and De Minaur hits a pretty nice backhand pass. And you just feel for Davidovich Fokina, like the millimeters, because he'd missed one against Kecmanovic in that Delray Beach final on a match point. He went for it and he missed by a few millimeters, and then again it's millimeters denying him here. And look, it's what makes tennis so compelling. You've got that narrative inside the match of these two guys trying to win this title, but you've got the bigger narrative outside of it, and us knowing what Davidovich Fokina has been through in his career, from, I shat myself against Holger Rune with the underarm serve at Wimbledon in the match tiebreak, to the Delray Beach final, to other losses in finals. Like, he's had so many brutal losses, and I think everyone watching this just, I really like Alex de Minaur. I was rooting for Alejandro Davidovich Fokina to get over the line and get a title, and yet it's just not the way it went. And then it went into a final set tiebreak, and de Minaur was the better player and got it done. And I just felt for Davidovich Fokina. Like, it's just rough. It's just really, really rough that he loses another heartbreaking final. Yeah,
and he got he got some incredibly heartfelt consolation from Alex de Minaur in the moment. I mean, the scenes of them on the chair together are well, beautiful and devastating. Very well handled by De Minaur, who in his speech gave him the "it's only a matter of time."
I know.
But it's not a given, is it? Like, this happening, like, he's obviously a good enough tennis player, obviously. But there's a reason this is happening. And each time it happens, other Matt, it feels more likely to happen a subsequent time. Like, the next time he's 5-2 up in a deciding set, I'm going to be putting a cushion in front of my eyes.
I think it's time to stop with the mismatched socks, personally. Like, they're kind of it's kind of like, take yourself more seriously. Like, match the socks, be a serious, like, just pretend, just like get yourself in the mode. And part of this was an interview I did with him, like, in Madrid, and he's been much better this year. And he said the reason he's much better is because he moved to Monaco, which, like, think what you want about Monte Carlo. And
Paying taxes was what was holding him back.
That was part of it. The other part of it was he was like, yeah, I get to play with Jannik Sinner every week. Like, I get to practice with these guys. And it's funny because, like, we think of it as like, well, yeah, of course, like, do your job seriously. And he was basically like, yeah, I was living in Malaga hitting with my friends, and it was nice. He's like, well, God, these guys really work. and so he sort of, like, is in, now he's hanging around the Monte Carlo Country Club and hitting with Medvedev and Zverev and all these other players and Sinner and all these other players who are the top players in the world. And he's just, like, practicing differently. And I think it's time. I think the next step is to start wearing socks that are the same color. I think he's so talented and has such incredible strokes and is, like, so beautiful a tennis player to watch. And, like, he has everything. Like, usually when you say, like, oh, like when Djokovic is telling Tsitsipas, you're going to win many of these Grand Slams, like, he doesn't actually think Tsitsipas is going to win many of these Grand Slams. But I think when De Minaur is telling Davidovich Fokina, like, you're too good not to win one of these, like, I think that's genuinely how people think about him. Like, they think he's a great player, but he's just the guy who will hit an underarm serve on match point. I'll keep coming back to the socks again, which I think goes along with, like, the quirky guy who wears a black sock and a white sock. Like, don't be quirky. Don't hit the underarm serve on match point. Like, be great. Be who you are. And, like, like, it's something that, like, a lot of people in all walks of life go to, and they're sort of, like, in their 20s and they're not quite ready to be an adult and they don't really know how to behave in the workplace. But, like, at some point you sort of settle down and you'd be like, and you sort of start acting like a grown up. And, like, I think, like, he's getting there. And, I use the socks as a metaphor, but, like, I think he's made great strides and just got to make that next step.
Well, how great to have such a easily rectifiable
right
thing to get you over the line.
Sometimes it is that simple of, like, you stop wearing ripped clothes to the office and, like, you start taking yourself a little more seriously and other people take you more seriously, and it becomes, like, a virtuous cycle. And, like, like, he's practicing with good players now and showing up in the weight room, and, like, he's doing all of these correct things. So
I think he takes the odd socks seriously. Like, I think that's become, it's something that is his thing. It's his, it's kind of his style. I'm in on the odd socks. I like the Davidovich Fokina odd socks, and I think he's gonna win a title one day in his odd socks, and he's gonna show that he can do it. I think you're absolutely right about, like, the steps to practice with better players more and all of that. I think he's done a lot of that work, and I think the day's going to come. I agree with you, Catherine, about the scar tissue building, but I do think that he is so good, and he does seem to be getting better, actually, that I do think a title is going to come for him. But I did also think of all those tennis relives when Alex de Minaur was saying that, and wince a little bit. But I think Matt's right. Like, players rate him. I remember when we spoke to Medvedev at Indian Wells, Medvedev put him on his men's backhand list, didn't he? He was one of the first names that came to mind for Medvedev with that shot. And David's always talking about his great ball strike and how that shot just flies off his strings, and he seems to have it under control a lot more. But yeah, trying to close these tournaments is tough. And it goes to show, like, no small feat for Alex de Minaur to have 10 of these, right? Like, a player of Davidovich Fokina's talent is struggling to get one, and Alex de Minaur's got 10. Like,
absolutely, yeah, it's a great point. In UMAG, Luciano Darderi has done the double. Which of Borstad and Gestad did he win? Which way round was it, Matt?
He won Borstad.
And Bublik won Gestad, and has also done the double by winning Kitzbühel. So Bublik and Darderi mopping up in the post-Wimbledon men's clay court swing. And that has Matt Futterman sort of softly shaking his head in a way that I very much approve of. Well done them. Well done me for signing Bublik to my fantasy team at just the right time.
Yes.
Apparently he's not playing Toronto, Bublik. He's kind of prioritised these points over... We've now got an eye roll to go with the head shake. Would you like to add a comment to your body language, Matt?
I mean, like, I'm all for players, like, being able to play tournaments to not have to travel as much, because, like, travel is exhausting. And if you're a European player, like, you know, you want to coming over to America for 2 months it's a lot. Like, and I know they've been in Europe since April, but, like, you know, they also have to go to the Australia, Middle East Sunshine Double first 3 months, which is no fun. So it's fine. But, like, clay court season ends with the last ball of Roland Garros. Like, just do that, tennis. And, like, and then let's move on. Like, I don't know. And then, you know, Clay can, and then Clay can, like, appear in the odd home and away Davis Cup thing, and then it's like and then it's awesome. Like, oh no, we're gonna put the Americans on clay, and you know, it's like that's where Clay should be the rest of the year, not in July after Wimbledon, so you can mop up some points and sneak your way. I don't know. It just feels kind of icky. So, I don't know.
Congratulations to Luciano Darderi and Alexander Bublik on your icky wins in UMAG and Kitzbühel, respectively. And to Marie Buzkova, who won the title in Prague. She won the Chekhov in the final, beat Linda Noskova. That's it for part one. Join us in part two for news. And there's a lot of it. Welcome back to part two of the Tennis Podcast, where we turn our attention now to news from the past, well, mostly the past week, but also some bits and bobs of news from the week before as well that we haven't yet had a chance to touch upon. Let's start with Jannik Sinner rehiring Umberto Ferrara, the fitness trainer, of course, who was implicated in the incident that led to his doping ban, his being massaged with steroid cream that led to him testing positive. Quote, Umberto has played an important role in Jannik's development to date, and his return reflects a renewed focus on continuity and performance at the highest level. The decision has been made in alignment with Jannik's management team as part of ongoing preparations for upcoming tournaments, including the Cincinnati Open and the US Open. Now, just to remind you of the timeline, obviously the incident, the The offending massage took place in Indian Wells last year. Jannik Sinner found out about the positive test a few weeks later. We found out about it almost exactly a year ago. It was the day after he won the title in Cincinnati that it became public. That was a week out from the US Open. And it wasn't until that time that it became public that Jannik Sinner made the decision to part ways with Umberto Ferrara. He then, of course, hired Novak Djokovic's old fitness training team. He dispatched with them after Halle recently. So now he's rehired Umberto Ferrara. It's more Jannik Sinner backstage chaos for the most unchaotic tennis player there is. Like, this, what next from Jannik Sinner? Right? This was really, really unexpected to me, Matt, and I honestly don't know what to make of it at all.
Massively unexpected, and yes, like pretty strange optics, right? Like, I don't really know why you would bring it all up again. Obviously, Ferrara's adamant that he told Naldi to use the spray for personal use and personal use only, and Ferrara says that he warned Naldi. So it seems to be that, like, Naldi is the one who's...
Naldi is under the bus.
Right. And, you know, Sinner presumably believes that and trusts that and has forgiven Ferrara for his part in it and kind of wants to move on with him in his career. I suppose I kind of look at it as kind of like, is Ferrara really that good that, like, there aren't other fitness trainers that you could potentially work with that don't have all of this sort of backstory and baggage? And look, it seems like this year he's been in really good physical condition with the team that he got rid of after Halle. Like, I think there's been a noticeable improvement actually in Sinner's physical condition on court. He looks less bothered by the hip a lot of the time, and he's lasting. You know, think of the tennis he played after 5.5 hours against Alcaraz at the French Open. Like, I've been less worried about his sort of physical condition, and I'm not saying that he didn't do important work with Ferrara in his career, and he obviously thinks that Ferrara is an important person, and he's moving forward with him. I found the expression reflecting a renewed focus on continuity and performance at the highest level slightly odd. Like, what has Jannik Sinner been focusing on, if not performance at the highest level for the last 18 months? It really didn't seem like he needed a renewed focus there. But he obviously did need a fitness trainer. Like, you can get through a tournament, as he showed at Wimbledon, as he showed at the US Open last year, without one. But he needs one. I'm just very surprised that he's gone in this direction, going back to someone who, you know, certainly played some part in really, like, damaging Sinner's reputation and potentially costing a big part of his career. Like, it's just a massive surprise to me, and it'd be going to be interesting to hear Sinner, like, talk about it as he will in his press conferences, rather than just with this statement from his team.
There's no doubt that optically this is a weird one, right? Like, eyebrows will be raised at this.
Now, I actually 100% disagree with both of you. Like, I don't understand why he fired him in the first place. Like, I never understood it. I thought that optically was bad. But
the fact is that he did.
I know.
So,
and I think
I
think that was a mistake. And that was like if I think that, like, actually contradicted in some ways the story he told and the story he wanted us all to believe, and the story that the ITIA believed, and that ultimately WADA, by giving him, you know, a slap on the wrist, basically believed too, which is that this was a mistake. This was like an honest mistake by people who were kind of stupid and should have known better. And by firing them initially, I thought he made it seem like there was something dirty about them, that he was trying to, like, distance himself from people who had, and this is if you believe that the cream was not covering up for something else, which is what all the scientists believe, which is what the tribunals have accepted. So, like, like if you're Nick Kyrgios, if you're Denis Shapovalov, if you're, or maybe he's backtracked or something. I don't know. I can't keep it straight. I can't keep everybody's like complaints on Twitter about this and bitterness about this straight. But like, there are people in the world who will never accept and will always think that there was shady and that he was. And yes, it seems like he was given some pretty good treatment in terms of like process and speed and stuff like that. But having said that, like, everything that's read, everything that's official is like that this was a dumb, honest mistake. Like,
but is
raise your hand
dumb enough to warrant a firing?
Okay, but like, raise your hand if you haven't done dumb things. And
okay, but
like,
if I employed
but there are consequences for that.
Yeah, if I employed somebody that did something dumb enough to get me banned for three months because I am ultimately responsible for their behaviour. Yeah, that is. I mean, it's up to Jannik Sinner whether he considers that a fireable offence, but he obviously did consider that a fireable offence.
Or somebody told him to consider that, or that someone said it was worth it to consider it a fireable offence, and then I don't know. I'm looking forward to speaking to him about it and finding out like exactly how he thought this through. But also, like, in the world of the rules, Umberto Ferrara is allowed to continue to coach anyone. Sinner probably thinks he's the best, and he's like, I want the best guy. Like, like, I actually want the person who's best for me. Why should I let Matteo Berrettini have that guy? Or like, why should I let someone else have that guy if he's okay and like I worked with him and he did something stupid, and like I said, like, people do dumb shit. Like, I've done dumb things that like, I don't know that I've done anything that like should have gotten me fired. But like, there's things that maybe could have gone a different way and it would have come out worse. And, and then maybe somebody would have said he should be fired. And I'm talking about like, lifeguarding at a country club when I was 16 years old. I'm not talking about like, plagiarism or anything like that in my career. So I'm just saying that, like, I don't know if the record shows that like this guy's clear. Like, I believe in second chances. I really do. Like, you commit a crime, you go to prison, you come out, like, you should be able to get a job. Like, and it's really hard. And so, like, I don't know.
I agree with that. I'm just surprised that Sinner's gone back there. Personally,
do we think there's any chance that this is the reference to a renewed focus on continuity in this statement? Is there any chance this is linked in Sinner's mind to the fact that Darren Cahill isn't going to be available for the US Open? Darren Cahill isn't going to be at the US Open, and he's seeking a comforting figure in the absence of Darren Cahill?
I think he's thinking longer term than that. But, he's got Simone as his sort of guy who's always there. And I don't think it's linked to that. But, that was another piece of Jannik Sinner news, wasn't it, that came out in the Italian press about Cahill not being at the US Open. There's obviously a lot of speculation at the moment. We don't really know what Cahill's going to be doing beyond this year. Wouldn't surprise me if he did continue working with Sinner beyond this year, even though at the start of the year it was kind of said that it would be his final year with him. Like, all that uncertainty.
Well, if Jannik Sinner is looking for a new coach come the end of 2025, Goran Ivanisevic is once again available. His, quote, brief but intense spell with Stefanos Tsitsipas is over. What do we have to say about this? We understand Tsitsipas is getting back together with his with his dad. I think after how Wimbledon went and the quotes that came out of Goran Ivanisevic after Wimbledon, I don't think this is any tremendous surprise. I think the episode is a surprise. I think Goran Ivanisevic signing up for this gig in the first place, given the known messiness around Tsitsipas and his dad and that sort of situation, and the recent getting his hands burnt that Ivanisevic Goran has sustained with his brief spell with Leylah Fernandez. I'm surprised he signed up for this role in the first place, but I'm not surprised that it didn't last long and has crashed and burned. As kind of sad as it makes me feel for Stefanos Tsitsipas, and it does make me intrigued about what Goran's going to do next, because he wants to coach. Like, he's taking these jobs because he wants to be out there. I think he's anxious about, these bad episodes stacking up on his CV, and I think he's desperate for another success. Maybe not a Novak Djokovic style success, but I think he'll be keen to get out there. But I also think it feels like a pretty critical move who he coaches next.
I probably would have fired Goran if he'd gone after me the way Goran went after Stefanos publicly. I
think it was probably already over.
It might. It maybe. Yeah, that seems possible. That seems possibly possible as well. Although I remember speaking with, I think, where were we? At the fancy place, Hurlingham. And I was just with like one other person speaking with Stefanos. And he was still speaking pretty kindly about Goran at that point and talking about learning stuff. And, I don't know if it was already over at that point, because I'd actually seen Stefanos like sitting at a picnic table at the All England Club during that qualifying week with his dad, having a look like what was a pretty serious heart-to-heart. And my immediate thought was like, oh, this is where that's going. Okay. So, but yeah, but also like, yeah, not really a great look for Goran, who I realize is a friend of the tennis podcast, to, be lighting up his former players like that.
No, I think this is a regrettable episode for Goran and his coaching CV. I really do. I don't think the Leylah Fernandez episode reflects badly on him at all. I think he worries that it does, and I think maybe that worry was part of why he accepted this role and was keen to jump back in quickly and prove himself. Which makes me, his stock couldn't have been higher after coaching Novak Djokovic, could it? It felt like he could pretty much have his pick of players that needed a coach and were willing to agree to his terms in terms of, number of weeks and pay, which I assume is, he's one of the pricier coaches out there, but
as is Darren Cahill, which right. My guess may be at the heart of the mystery around how much longer they'll be together.
Interesting. Okay. But yeah.
That's just a guess. But I always think, I think everything's about money. So, because it generally is. So.
Is Naomi Osaka's split with Patrick Mouratoglou then about money?
I think that might be one where it's. It might be about her not making the money that she thinks she should, or getting the results.
This was announced yesterday via social media, as things are. She said lots of warm things about Patrick Mouratoglou, but that is the end of their relationship. She lost out to Emma Raducanu in Washington last week. She's lost, isn't she, Matt? Naomi Osaka is lost right now.
Yeah, and look, when she hired Patrick Mouratoglou in the first place, looking at the recent Patrick Mouratoglou history, I was always worried about sort of where it might end up, that coaching relationship. You know, if you look at sort of where he left Holger Rune and where he left Simona Halep, it's probably in a worse place than where he found them. And yet I did think that there might be an initial jolt and an initial impact. And I think the sort of real shame for Osaka is that in that period, in those first few tournaments she had with Mouratoglou, she got injured, didn't she? You know, she had to retire against Goff at the back end of last year. She had to retire in that Auckland final this year where she debatably lost to Towson, and then she had to retire at the Australian Open. And I actually think she was playing really good tennis then early in this partnership, but she was having to retire and she was injured. And then as it's gone on, well, in her words, the results haven't been resulting, and there's just been a lot of red flags, really, over the last few months. You know, that statement from Mouratoglou about no stars in women's tennis, like you're literally working with Naomi Osaka, and that press conference in Paris where Osaka spoke about, you know, not wanting to let him down and how he used to work with the greatest of all time, and now he's seeing that performance after her loss to Badosa. Like, that was a red flag of not a healthy player-coach relationship. And then even at Wimbledon, when David had that exchange with Osaka in the press conference, and she was like, yeah, I didn't know he'd said that, but I do see some stuff that he says when I'm scrolling. And like, it just wasn't really sounding good, and the results haven't been good over the last few months, and yeah, lost is kind of a good way to put it, really, and that very often leads to a coaching change. So I'm not surprised by this one, to be honest.
Likewise. More US Open mixed doubles pairings were announced this past week. If anything, things have got weirder. So confirmed, we have Emma Navarro, Jannik Sinner. I'm afraid, Matt, Holger Rune and Amanda Anisimova does seem to be confirmed. Iga Swiatek and Casper Ruud, Lena Rybakina and Taylor Fritz, Jasmine Paolini, Lorenzo Musetti, Jessica Pegula, Tommy Paul, Mira Andreeva, Daniel Medvedev, Madison Keys and Francis Tiafoe. Those partnerships, those pairs are confirmed based on their combined rankings. Now, I should point out that, as we detailed last week, things get weird now in the tennis schedule, and the final of Cincinnati is on a Monday, and the final of Cincinnati is 3 weeks today, and the US Open mixed doubles starts 3 weeks tomorrow. There are going to be withdrawals, players reaching the final in Cincinnati, and a lot of players on that list would be favoured to reach the semis and or finals of Cincinnati. They're not going to be rushing to New York to make sure they reach the start line for the mixed doubles, is my prediction. So look, those are the confirmed teams for now, but I think there are going to be withdrawals. We have some more doubles players that have entered the fray. We've got some interesting partnerships. We have Gabby Dabrowski, the Canadian doubles specialist, partnering with Felix Auger-Aliassime. And we have the two doubles number ones. I feel like combining to kind of try and make a statement here. I love this. Marcelo Arevalo and Katerina Siniakova. I'm really interested about what the US Open do with those two and whether they get in. And we also have Su Wei-Shea and Jan Zielinski. I get him confused with Jan Zalesny, the javelin thrower of the 90s. No, Jan Zielinski. We also have Donna Vekic and Hubert Hurkacz, and we have Venus Williams and Riley Opelka. We have Katie Bolter and Alex de Minaur. And we have, I think, the weirdest of the bunch, Karolina Mukova and Andrei Rublev.
Yeah, it's great. It's good. It's great to see the organizers of the U.S. It's great to see like Eric Buderak and Stacey Alistair squirm in this situation. Like,
Yeah, and Siniaka and Aravalo really have caused a squirm there, I
Oh,
think.
yeah,
I think that's
it's
a
great.
really fun question that they have posed.
I mean, it's perfect in terms of like, okay, like, and I don't know. I have no idea what they're gonna do. But if I had to bet, I would think they would let in the defending champions, and then everyone else is just going to be like a bright lights name. And like,
so the defending champions, that would be Irani and Vavasori. You think they'll
Yep.
be the only doubles specialist team?
and then they'll lean
allowed
in,
in.
and then they're just going to be like, no, this mixed doubles is. We said we're trying to do something else, and they're going to double down on Venus Williams. Like, they're going to take the biggest stars they can get. Like right now, like Djokovic and Danilovic aren't in. Like, you're going to not let
Alcaraz,
in Novak.
Raducanu aren't in. I suspect they will get a wild card.
Right, exactly. Like,
But
and I think
then, Matt, they also might have to withdraw.
they
If
might.
Alcaraz goes deep in Cincinnati.
Right.
Or Raducanu.
Yeah, look, I was thrilled that those doubles players entered as well, because like there is the possibility that this actually is interesting now with those pairs. Like, I definitely think you could create with the wild cards a good field. I agree with Matt. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to lean into the single stars who have entered but haven't made the cut because of ranking. And look, the biggest problem for me is the format. Like, it can only be a certain amount of interesting because of the format, with it being fast four and sudden death deuce, and all of that just takes the sting out of it for me anyway. But I like the fact that the doubles players have said, hang on a minute, let's make them say no to us.
Right.
Is kind of what I like about it. Yeah, fun. I was pleased to see that extended entry list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me
No,
too.
it's great. And yeah, and I think those. I mean, I guess they're going to say like, yeah, they're great doubles players. They have their tournament. Like that's what doubles is for. This mixed doubles is something else. The marketplace.
It's something else, but it's not an exhibition. No one say
Right.
the word.
The marketplace has rejected the other form of mixed doubles. We want to do this thing with singles players, fast stuff.
Speaking, as we have been as a theme throughout this show, of wildcards, let's talk about Bill Ackman. Now, this is a tennis story from a couple of weeks ago that got a lot of attention at the time. Bill Ackman, for anybody that doesn't know, is a billionaire hedge fund manager of some notoriety, particularly in the States, but I think he's pretty well known the world over as well. Huge tennis fan. And he played in the Hall of Fame Open in Newport, Rhode Island this year, a competitive ATP sanctioned event, a challenger event. It used to be a main tour event, downgraded to challenger this year, but a sanctioned event nonetheless. He took a wild card into the doubles competition alongside Jack Sock, who is himself now a retired tennis player. Bill Ackman is 59 years old and pretty bad at tennis. Like, they lost badly to Omar Jasika and Bernard Tomic, and Omar Jasika and Bernard Tomic were not playing at full pelt, would be my assessment of the clips that I saw. The whole thing was, in terms of competitive sport, an absolute joke. And it was followed up by a lengthy tweet by Bill Ackman, sort of blaming Jack Sock for not giving him the juice side, blaming his poor performance on Jack Sock for not giving him the juice side. And it was also followed up with an announcement that Bill Ackman would be giving a $10 million endowment to the International Tennis Hall of Fame. All lovely and above board. Matt Futterman, how icky is this whole episode for you?
Well, the epilogue of that was they rejected that. that $10 million donation, that thing, they didn't accept it. And so he, in trying to save face, then gave that to the JTCC, which is a junior tennis champion center, which is the academy that produced Tiafoe and Haley Baptiste. It's the DC area thing. So that's just the epilogue to it. But
is your sense, Matt, that and call me a cynic here, that donation was rejected in response to the backlash and the publicity that this episode received?
It like very much spoke to quid pro quo, and all of a sudden International Tennis Hall of Fame was like, ooh, like, I don't think they had a big problem with the quid pro quo. It was the problem of all the attention towards the quid pro quo, which probably got them a little nervous. Also, Bill Ackman, as you said, of some renown, he's been a big Trump supporter. He's been a big, at least this go around in the election cycle. He's also been sort of at the forefront of cracking down on his alma mater, Harvard, on what he deems as them being too lenient towards people who are more sympathetic with Palestinians in Gaza and anti-Israel. Some of us would say there's this thing called free speech, which is pretty important as well. That's been a big issue. So he's like definitely a lightning rod for a lot of very hot button issues in America that may also have had something to do with the International Tennis Hall of Fame board's decision not to do that. I guess what this brings up is is another sort of much larger issue that goes across tennis, which is where do you draw the line with trade-offs if people are willing to give lots of money and want something in return for it? And the best corollary I would draw to it is, legacy admissions at prestigious and selective universities where, rich people give tens of millions of dollars and put their name on a library, and, they're arguably less than qualified children and grandchildren get to attend that university. You can say, that's horrible, and why should they get that admission? But then there's people who argue, who would say, and I've heard people who you would expect to take that side of it's horrible, who then say, yeah, what's the big deal? We let a couple of ding-dongs in and we get a new library, or, we get some more endowed professorships. So we'll let the ding-dongs in. So we let Bill Ackman play a stupid doubles match and embarrass himself on there, and the JTCC ends up with $10 million that they can, use to provide more access to kids playing tennis. And I'm not saying I advocate that position. I'm saying I could argue both sides of it. And so, but at the same time, I think generally it's pretty distasteful having a billionaire buy his way into, a tour or a challenger tour event that way. Bill Ackman not qualified to be playing, the doubles at the 125 in Newport, clearly.
Yeah, I thought the whole thing was pretty pathetic, really. I mean, he's also massively funding the PTPA, isn't he? Which looks out for player interest and earning opportunities, and there he is taking up a spot in the draw that someone else could be using, and Jack Sock's spot as well could have gone to someone else. And yeah, I just think the tournament and the Hall of Fame kind of degraded itself really by by allowing this to happen. And also, like, the ATP has a thing in its rule book about best efforts, and Bill Ackman, I think, was giving his best effort in that match, but no one else on the court was, to make it the scoreline it was.
Professional tennis match.
No.
Other news this week: British tennis player Tara Moore has been given a 4-year doping ban. She had been cleared by an independent tribunal 18 months ago, but an appeal by the ITIA has been upheld by CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The ban starts immediately, but will be reduced by the 19 months that Tara Moore was provisionally suspended for when the case first came to light. In May 2022, she tested positive for nandrolone and boldenone at a tournament in Bogota, Colombia. So it was in December of the following year, 2023, that an independent tribunal ruled that contaminated meat was the source of the positive test and that Tara Moore bore no fault or negligence. She said that she suffered 19 months of lost time and emotional distress, and her reputation had been damaged as a result. She returned to the tour in April 2024 and has mostly played on the ITF tour since then. But this case was taken to CAS by the ITIA. There was a hearing in March, and the case has been upheld by CAS, the ITIA's case. She's received the subsequent ban, and she will now not be free to play again until the start of the 2028 season. They said after reviewing the scientific and legal evidence, the majority of the CAS panel considered that the player did not succeed in proving that the concentration of nandrolone in her sample was consistent with the ingestion of contaminated meat. The panel concluded that Ms. Moore failed to establish that the ADRV, the anti-doping rule violation, was not intentional. The appeal by the ITIA is therefore upheld, and the decision rendered by the independent tribunal is set aside. Look, it's grist to the mill for people, commentators, players that are outraged and upset and concerned about the inequality in handling of cases like this, whatever you think of the eventual verdict, the length of time the process has taken to reach this verdict, a case that bears some similarities to Jannik Sinner's case, which of course was settled relatively quickly and harmlessly, certainly relative to this. Now, I'm not saying they're the same case. It has been ruled by CAS that it's a very different situation, and it's not a no fault or negligence case, but certainly the length of time this all has taken, which has been a consistent complaint of Tara Moore's, does seem to shed light on a deep inequality in the situation. The same inequality, though, that it exists within the general justice system, which is that the type of justice that you receive very much depends on the money and the power you have to throw behind your defence. But nonetheless, this is it's been a sorry old tale from start to finish, really, Matt.
Right now we're in a situation where there is just a great emphasis on the levels of the levels of substance that are found in these tests that are taken at a certain time. And I think that's what the case largely turned on, was that the level that was found in her blood was just not consistent with, in their view and in their scientists' view and in the view of the majority of the CAS panel, with unintentional use or with a meat contamination. And, whereas with Iga Swiatek and with Sinner, the levels in their blood was consistent with what they have determined to be unintentional use. And, it's one of those things where, like, if you believe in those numbers and you believe the scientists, then it's a completely justified decision. But not everybody believes in those numbers and that idea. And And I don't know enough about contaminated meat to know whether all pieces of contaminated meat are contaminated equally.
Last bit of news that Matt has put in the agenda, but I am going to insert an extra bullet point on the end here. But last bit of news from the agenda is that Ons Jabeur has announced she's taking a step back from tennis. She said, for the past 2 years, I've been pushing myself so hard, fighting through injuries and facing many other challenges. But deep down, I haven't felt happy on court for some time now. Tennis is such a beautiful sport, but right now, I feel it's time to take a step back and finally put myself first, to breathe, to heal, and to rediscover the joy of simply living. And as somebody that interviewed Ons Jabeur during Wimbledon for a Friends episode, for it was one of our interviews in our Wimbledon edition of the Tennis Podcast Meets. As sad as that statement is, I was quite relieved to see it, because she was somebody so clearly unhappy, to a quite distressing extent to witness and hear really during Wimbledon. So I'm glad she's making a change and striving for that happiness, and I hope one day she can find it on the court again. But if she doesn't, I hope she finds it somewhere. So it's sad that it's come to this, but I wish her well. I really, really wish her well. And just to end our news section on a positive note, I'm going to insert the bullet point that Andy Murray has hard launched his new dog. We knew about this because he had mentioned it during one of his live shows, and we had spies in the audience. Well, no, we just knew people that had been to them, and they reported back to us. Amongst other things, Andy Murray has a new dog, but he hadn't launched the dog publicly. He has now done that on Instagram with photos, but no name is reported, and no breed has been reported either. So I'm left trying to diagnose the breed using my own dog breed diagnosis skills. I think maybe a flat-coated retriever of some kind. At first I thought Cocker Spaniel, but I think it's a bit bigger than a Cocker Spaniel, especially as... Look, it's hard because I don't know this dog's age, I don't know its name, I don't know its gender, I need more information, Andy. I'm very pleased for you, and I'm pleased for the tennis dog crossover world, but please stop withholding the essential information. That's my...
Well, soon your dog, Billie Jean, and Andy's dog will be able to, frolic in the new 30-acre park, and Wimbledon is going to be building for you. So there you go.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's where you'll be able to get all of your information from. So
fingers crossed. That's it for part 2. Join us in part 3 for a look ahead to this week in tennis in Canada. Welcome back to part 3 of the Tennis Podcast, where we turn our attention to Canada and the WTA event, which happens this year in Montreal, and the ATP event, which happens in Toronto. Of course, they've both begun already. I can tell you that because I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching Bianca Andreescu heartbreak. And it really was heartbreak. I mean, she won her match against Barbora Krejcikova, was playing incredibly well. It was a throwback. The crowd were behind her. She was come-oning all over the place. I was getting lured in, despite promising myself I wouldn't get lured in and get hopeful about Bianca Andreescu. But there I was, 2 o'clock in the morning. I was all in. She stands up to the line on match point, and she rolls her ankle on match point, and all you hear is just agonizing screams and wails. It was an absolutely horrifying sight and sound. There was a long break. She had her ankle taped up. She somehow finished the match, and I actually do wonder if Barbora Krejcikova, maybe not even consciously, deliberately, but on some level deliberately hit 2 unforced errors, because unforced errors from Krejcikova really felt like the only way Andreescu was going to be winning that match. She could not move at all. And Krejcikova was incredibly generous to her, immediately came over to her side of the court and was very, very concerned about her. So, look, I don't know. Andreescu she's through to the next round. She's due to be facing Mira Andreeva, but she was sobbing in her post-match interview. It was a very, very tough scene. So, look, you don't know with ankle rolls, do you, until the next day? You don't really know what the lie of the land is. But it didn't look and sound good. to me. So that's your Bianca Andreescu update. Marketa Vondrousova, Danielle Collins, they've already won in Montreal. We've got Vasek Pospisil playing his last match and Eugenie Bouchard playing her last match. I would say those two events are columns in the let's get rid of wildcards column, personally. But maybe the ticket buyers of Toronto and Montreal feel differently.
Bouchard, another pickleball player, like the aforementioned Jack Sock.
Yeah.
I think it was just one of the, like with a situation where you get an alert on your phone that someone has died, and you're sort of like, were they not dead already? With that, when I saw Jeannie Bouchard was retiring, I was sort of like, really? She's not? What? She was active player? Really?
Yeah.
So, my sense.
Yeah, very good. Montreal, we have two-time defending champion Jessica Pegula going for the three-peat. We've got no Sabalenka, and that means that Coco Gauff is the top seed. Swiatek is the second seed. The projected quarterfinals, according to the draw, are Gauff against Paulini Andreeva against Navarro, Anisimova against Pegula, and Keys against Swiatek. In Toronto, Matt, my surprise at being reminded that Alexei Popyrin is the defending Canadian champion.
I did check
quickly, doesn't it?
I did check with two different sources, and can confirm that Alexei Popyrin is the defending champion.
I have so few memories of Alexei Popyrin winning Canada last year, but well done to him. So we have Popyrin defending his title. There's no Jannik Sinner, no Carlos.
I mean, he might defend it because
right, nobody else is there. It's him and Vasek Pospisil. So something.
He's out. It's him and Facundo Bagnis.
Oh, is that it? Pospisil's career has come to an official end.
Yeah.
Okay, Facundo Bagnis or Alexei Popyrin, pick your poison. No Jack Draper either. So projected quarterfinals are Zverev against Rune, Musetti against Ruud, Tiafoe against Shelton, and Rublev against Fritz. The finals are on Thursday, the 7th of August, of course. Why wouldn't they be on a Thursday? We'll be back with a show next Monday, the 4th of August, with David, and then our review show of Toronto and Montreal following that final will be on Friday the 8th of August, and as with all our post combined 1000 event shows, that one will be live on YouTube, so that'll be 8 p.m. UK time on the evening of Friday the 8th of August. You pumped about Canada, Matt? A Thursday final?
They just don't think of our schedule, do they?
No.
When they cook up these tournaments, like we're having to do such a rejig, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. We're going to podcast our way through it, but it is awkward for us.
Yeah. Look, am I excited about it? Look. Actually, the Montreal draw is pretty stacked. There's no Sabalenka, but most of the other women are there, so I'm excited for that. I like
Toronto.
I like the Montreal Toronto. Getting two cities. It just used to be so good when it was a week. I do struggle to get that excited about it because I know there's a whole lot of nothing. But yes, I will be excited at points. I can promise you that.
I want to have been in the room when they were like going through the calendar and like trying to organize it, and they came up with this, and they were like, "Yeah, this works,"
Right.
And like they somehow like there's like was there not like a couple of people in the room who are like, wait, no, this is the most fucked up thing in the world. Like this works in no shape or form. Like these are two big tournaments, one starting before the other one finishes, like 2 days before. Like where are we? This is so confusing. These are supposed to be the tentpole events of the summer. Like what are we doing? And yeah, so it would have I mean, if anything was pointed out the absurdity of the schedule's messed up, there's not enough days, this is stupid. Here we are.
Pretty excited then, I think, Matt.
Yeah, this is stupid. Here we are. Well done, tennis.
Here we are. But I am
Matt.
excited. I would say I'm most excited. I mean, Montreal. I mean, any WTA event these days is stacked. Like, I just think there are so many good players. And, Washington was, the perfect example. It was, Sakkari and Raducanu. And, and, the early was, wow. That's a hard match. Osaka Raducanu early. There was a lot of early hard matches. So they're all stacked, and Toronto will be what it'll be. It'll be competitive. There'll be people trying really hard to win a lot of money and a big trophy.
Right. Well, I hope that's whetted everybody's appetite for the week ahead. Matt, thank you for those levels of excitement. Thank you very much for your contributions this week. Fascinating as always. And we'll be seeing you we fly to New York 3 weeks today.
3 weeks
during the Cincinnati final, of course, because because tennis.
So you will be here. You will be here for the mixed doubles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We don't miss any official Grand Slam event, Matt.
You're gonna bring your airline sick bag to the right.
I love that in the graphics for the announcement, the US Open official graphics on Instagram, it actually says at the top official Grand Slam event. I really do feel like if you're having to point that out, a battle has been lost somewhere along the line.
Yeah. And then they're going to point to this two packed stadiums of screaming people, and they're going to declare victory, and it's going to be hard to argue with them.
Yeah. Hello to our mascots. Hello to Phoebe, to Maisie, and to Roger. Hello to Greg, Chris, and Jeff, our top folks and executive producers. We are, of course, part of the Athletic Podcast Network. Check out Matt's work. Check out Charlie's work. Check out everything they have to offer in The Athletic. We will be back on Thursday? No.
For friends.
We'll be back this week on Thursday for a live show for Friends of the Tennis Podcast. We'll be back on Monday, a week today, Monday the 4th of August, with a show as normal with David. And then we'll be back a week on Friday the 8th of August, with our wrap of Canada live on YouTube at 8 p.m. UK time. Not complicated at all. Thank you, tennis, for being oh so simple with your calendar. Thank you, Matt, for being on today's show. Thank you for listening. We'll speak to you soon.